What if I told you that a movie from 1999 perfectly predicted the mental health crisis we're facing today? Picture this, you're living the American dream. You have a corporate job, a nice apartment filled with designer furniture, and you're climbing that ladder of success. But here's the twist, you're absolutely miserable. You can't sleep, you feel disconnected from everything around you, and you're wondering if this is all there is to life. Sound familiar? This is exactly where our story begins, and it's a feeling that resonates with millions of people today more than ever before. The protagonist we're following is a perfect representation of modern consumer culture's victim. He works in corporate America, specifically dealing with car recalls, a job that requires him to put a dollar value on human life. Think about that for a moment. Every day, he has to calculate whether it's cheaper to recall a defective product or pay out settlements to families who lose loved ones. This isn't just a job, it's a soul-crushing examination of how capitalism can strip away our humanity piece by piece. But the real genius of this narrative lies in how it explores the psychology of modern masculinity and isolation. Our main character represents what psychologists call learned helplessness. He's been conditioned to believe that his worth comes from his possessions, his job title, and his ability to consume. He's essentially sleepwalking through life, going through the motions without any real purpose or connection. The insomnia that plagues him isn't just a plot device, it's a metaphor for the restlessness that comes with living an inauthentic life. When you're not aligned with your true self, when you're living according to society's expectations rather than your own values, your mind literally cannot rest. This is something that sleep researchers and psychologists have documented extensively. Chronic insomnia is often linked to feelings of meaninglessness and existential anxiety. Enter the support groups. Initially, our protagonist discovers that by attending support groups for various illnesses he doesn't have, he can finally feel something. He can finally cry, finally connect with other human beings, finally experience genuine emotion. This is such a profound commentary on how isolated we've become in modern society. Think about it, he has to pretend to be dying to feel alive. He has to fake vulnerability to experience real connection. This speaks to something that sociologists call social atomization, the breakdown of social bonds and community structures that once provided meaning and connection. In previous generations, people had extended families, religious communities, neighborhood bonds, and workplace relationships that provided genuine human connection. Today, many people live in what researchers call social deserts. They may have hundreds of social media connections, but lack deep, meaningful relationships. The support groups serve as a mirror to our modern therapeutic culture. While therapy and mental health awareness are incredibly important, there's also a way that our society has commodified even our pain and healing. We've turned emotional processing into another consumer experience, another product to be purchased rather than something that emerges from genuine community and connection. But then something interesting happens in our story. Another person starts showing up to the same support groups, someone who's also faking their problems. This creates a fascinating dynamic because it forces our protagonist to confront his own inauthenticity. When you see someone else playing the same game you're playing, it becomes impossible to maintain the illusion that you're being genuine. This other character represents a different approach to dealing with modern alienation. Where our protagonist is passive and conforming, this person is active and rebellious. They're both responding to the same underlying problem, the meaninglessness and disconnection of consumer culture, but they're choosing radically different paths. The relationship that develops between these characters is complex and psychologically rich. On one level, it can be read as a friendship between two people who recognize each other's pain. On another level, it represents different aspects of the same psyche, the conformist versus the rebel, the consumer versus the destroyer, the civilized versus the primal. What's really being explored here is the concept of shadow psychology, something that Carl Jung wrote about extensively. Shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we've repressed or denied in order to fit into society. For our protagonist, his shadow includes his anger at being manipulated by consumer culture, his frustration with meaningless work, his desire for authentic connection, and his need to feel powerful and significant. The underground fighting that emerges in the story serves multiple psychological functions. On the surface level, it provides a physical outlet for the emotional and psychological pain that these men are carrying. But more deeply, it represents a rejection of the sanitized, risk-free, bubble-wrapped existence that consumer culture promotes. Think about how we live today. We're constantly protected from discomfort, from risk, from pain. We have insurance for everything, safety regulations for every activity, and medication for every uncomfortable feeling. While these things serve important purposes, they can also insulate us from the experiences that make us feel most alive. The fighting represents a return to physical reality, to consequence, to the immediate and undeniable truth of bodily experience. The psychology behind this is fascinating. When people engage in controlled risk-taking or intense physical experiences, their brains release endorphins and other chemicals that can create feelings of euphoria and clarity. This is why extreme sports, cold water swimming, and other challenging physical activities have become so popular as forms of therapy and self-discovery. But the fighting also serves as a metaphor for the internal battles that everyone faces. We all have parts of ourselves that we're fighting against: old patterns, limiting beliefs, societal expectations that don't serve us. The physical fighting externalizes these internal conflicts and makes them visible and tangible. As the fighting evolves into something larger, we see how personal transformation can scale into social movement. The individual healing and awakening that happens through confronting pain and authenticity begins to spread to others who are dealing with similar issues. This reflects how real change often works. It starts with individuals doing their own internal work, and then that energy spreads to create broader cultural shifts. The evolution of the movement in the story also demonstrates how easily revolutionary energy can become corrupted or misdirected. It starts as personal healing and authentic connection can quickly become its own form of dogma and control. This is a pattern we see repeatedly in history. Movements that begin with genuinely liberating intentions can become just as oppressive as the systems they sought to replace. The corporate job that our protagonist holds becomes increasingly symbolic as the story progresses. He's literally calculating the value of human life for profit, which represents the ultimate dehumanization of capitalism. But more than that, his job requires him to be complicit in a system that he fundamentally disagrees with. Every day he has to violate his own values just to survive economically. This creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort that comes from holding contradictory beliefs or values. Over time, this dissonance can lead to anxiety, depression, and a sense of losing oneself. Many people today experience this same conflict, working in jobs that feel meaningless or even harmful, while knowing they need the income to survive. The material possessions that fill our protagonist's apartment serve as another powerful symbol. He's essentially trying to build an identity out of objects, to find meaning and self-worth through consumption. This reflects what advertisers and marketers have been selling us for decades. The idea that we can purchase our way to happiness, significance, and identity, but there's something profoundly empty about trying to fill internal voids with external things. No matter how much stuff you acquire, it can never address the fundamental questions of purpose, connection, and meaning that drive human happiness. The apartment full of expensive furniture becomes a prison rather than a home, a showcase of everything he's supposed to want, but that leaves him feeling more empty than ever. The destruction of these possessions later in the story represents a liberation from this false identity. And you're no longer defined by what you own. You're forced to discover who you actually are underneath all the societal conditioning. This can be terrifying, but also incredibly freeing. The female character who enters this world brings a different energy and perspective. She represents chaos, unpredictability, and a different kind of authenticity. Where the male characters are dealing with their alienation through control and structure, she embraces the messiness and uncertainty of life. Her presence forces everyone to confront their assumptions about relationships, intimacy, and what it means to truly connect with another person. Her struggles with addiction and self-destructive behavior aren't glorified in the story, but they're presented as another response to the same underlying problems of meaninglessness and disconnection. Some people try to numb their pain, others try to fight their way out of it, and still others try to buy their way to happiness. All of these strategies are attempts to deal with the fundamental challenge of finding authentic meaning in a society that often feels hollow and artificial. The relationship dynamics that develop reveal how our connections with others are often projections of our internal struggles. We're not just relating to other people as they actually are, but as representatives of parts of ourselves that we're trying to understand, integrate, or reject. This makes relationships incredibly complex and layered with psychological meaning. As the story reaches its climax, we see how the desire for change and transformation can become destructive when it's not balanced with wisdom and compassion. Urge to tear down systems that aren't working is understandable and sometimes necessary, but destruction without a clear vision for what comes next often creates more chaos and suffering. The ending of this narrative is deliberately ambiguous and open to interpretation. This reflects the reality that there are no simple answers to the complex problems of modern life. The questions it raises about consumer culture, authentic living, meaningful work, and genuine connection don't have easy solutions. Each person has to find their own way of navigating these challenges. What makes this story so enduring and relevant is how it captures something essential about the human experience in late-stage capitalism. It shows us characters who are economically successful but spiritually bankrupt, who have everything they're supposed to want but lack everything they actually need. This paradox is something that millions of people are living with today. The psychological insights embedded in this narrative continue to resonate because the underlying problems haven't been solved. If anything, they've intensified. Social media has made comparison and competition more constant and visible. Economic inequality has increased. Job insecurity has grown. Environmental destruction has accelerated. The pace of life has become even more frantic and overwhelming, yet the story also points toward potential solutions. Authentic connection with others who share your struggles, the courage to reject false values and find your own path. Willingness to face discomfort and pain rather than numbing or avoiding it. The recognition that true security comes from accepting uncertainty rather than trying to control everything. Most importantly, it suggests that transformation is possible, but it requires letting go of who you think you're supposed to be in order to discover who you actually are. This process is never easy or comfortable, but it's the only path to genuine freedom and fulfillment. What resonated most with you about this psychological breakdown? Share your thoughts below and follow for more deep dives into the hidden meanings behind iconic stories.